He refers to himself in the statement as a dad. Should that be the response from Joe Biden from here?
I think so. I mean, the fact is we all have relatives who've gone through trouble. And, it shows the system works. The system worked for Hunter Biden. The system worked for Donald Trump in his recent case. And that's what people want. They want a fair system. They also want to understand Joe Biden's a dad. And I think the hug showed that, and it reminds everyone that you go through tough times as a parent.
Well, he is a dad, and it makes you wonder the things that he will be willing to say that could characterize both his son and former President Trump. Is it that easy to call out a convicted felon when your son is one?
Absolutely, because you're just being honest. You're just talking about what actually happened. And, Hunter Biden's not running for president. Donald Trump is. And that's the key difference here. And that's what voters will understand. Republicans have been going after Hunter Biden for his computer, for the gun charge for years and years. And every poll shows us that voters don't care because Hunter Biden's not running for anything. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are, and that's how voters are going to think about it. They're not going to think about what their kids do. And, you don't see Democrats going after Trump's kids. Like, it's just not relevant. We got to stay focused on the choice in 148 days between these two opponents.
It's interesting who we've heard from today. Some of the empathy, maybe I should say restraint shown by Donald Trump, who actually told a story in an interview about his brother who died from his struggle with alcoholism. We've seen others, Jim, from the Second Amendment community talk about this today. The central charge against the president's son was the violation of a rule that makes it a felony for an unlawful user of a controlled substance to receive or possess a firearm. Could the one unintended consequence of this trial be a change in gun laws that allow, say, cannabis users to apply for a firearm?
Well, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I think that, we need to look and think to ourselves in the modern age, do our laws make sense? You've seen some really good bipartisan work on guns recently, some really good bipartisan work on sentencing reform. And I think, if what could come out of this trial is some more bipartisanship on that, Joe, I would think that would be a really good output. What is otherwise a kind of a sad story.
Well, about that being a sad story, Jim, it did seem that while this case did center around gun-related charges, it also very much was about someone's struggle with addiction and how it impacted a family. I'm not sure the same is going to be able to be said for the separate trial he's facing in September in California for tax evasion. That is a person of means not paying taxes over a period of 4 years. Is that actually the one that is more politically dangerous to President Biden, not least of which because it is so much closer to the election?
I don't think either one of them are dangerous for the same reason I talked about earlier. Voters don't really care about what your kids do. Democrats were silly to go after President Trump's son-in-law and his daughter in the campaign 4 years ago. I condemn that. Then, not because I'm a big lover of them, but I think it's not how voters think. I mean, the three of us have talked about this in the past. Voters think about politics 4 minutes a week. And in that time, they really want to know what's in it for them. And discussions about candidates' kids are just a waste of time.
Well, so would we be even talking about this, knowing that Hunter Biden's not running for any office, never mind president? Would we be talking about this if it were not for Donald Trump's own legal challenges?
Probably because, the families have become such big deals in these campaigns. I don't think it's right. And I think, when I ran President Obama's campaign, one of the Republicans running for president criticized President Obama's daughter. And that was the one time the president called me angry. And he said, can you just remind people that kids are off limits? And I called the candidate and ripped into him. And he said, Jim, you're right. So I just don't think these things are appropriate.
As we consider whether or not, and it seems that you think more than likely that this isn't actually going to influence greatly the way voters feel about Biden or Trump, for that matter, it becomes a question of what actual influence in the polls, if at all, we're going to see from Donald Trump's own conviction. It's been almost 2 weeks since he was found guilty of those 34 felony counts. It doesn't seem that there has been much movement yet. Jim, do you expect it's going to show up later on as perhaps voters pay more attention than just 4 minutes a week because we're closer to the election? Or do you think net none of these legal questions ultimately impact voters who are more concerned with, say, the economy?
No, I think you're right that it's going to come up as people think about this. People are now starting to confront this choice they have in 148 days. They don't want this choice. 80% of Americans didn't think it was going to be Trump versus Biden, didn't want it. But this is now the choice they have. And so what I really am focusing on are these double doubters, these voters who don't like either one of these candidates. And with those people, almost 80% of them think that Trump should have been convicted, and it's an issue in the election, and they're going to use it as one of the issues. I think you're right that it's, the economy is always the biggest issue, but I think this issue is going to weigh on people because they start to think to themselves, do I really want to have the craziness that's around Donald Trump for the next 4 years?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you were preparing the Biden campaign for a fall trial for Hunter Biden, with everything that you've seen here, this is going to be a more serious case involving tax evasion. Republicans will try to connect the dots to what they call the Biden crime family. In that case, Jim, what should be the prepared response?
That they're just distracting from the real issues like the economy, like other things, that Hunter Biden's not on the ballot, and that Democrats have to stay laser focused on making this a choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I used to say to Barack Obama all the time, Joe, look, if it's a referendum on the incumbent usually loses. But if it's a choice between the candidates, you'll win that choice. And that's what the Biden campaign will remember in the entire general election.
Well, as you keep reminding us, Jim, they have 148 more days to convince voters that Biden is the right choice. If you were to give us your confidence level right now that Biden can win re-election, how high is it?
Well, look, 100% he can win. I think it's going to be an incredibly close race. I think if the election were held today, Trump has a lead, and I think Democrats need to understand that. Although when you look at the electoral votes, when you look at a pathway to 270 electoral votes, I play a lot of Texas Hold'em, and you'd rather have Joe Biden's cards than Donald Trump's, just because it's easier to win 270 electoral votes through the Midwestern states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin for Joe Biden than it is Donald Trump. And so I'd still rather have Biden's cards, but, Trump has a very small lead, and I think we're going to be in for another nail-biting election where the three of us will spend, a couple days after the election trying to figure out who the hell just won.